Hey there, it's Ben from patternprofits.net. I was going to talk to you today about anchoring the volume weighted average price, looking at iRobot here. The anchored VWAP from the high coming down acts as resistance. Anchored VWAP from the low off of the prior base is what acts as support, and that's what gives you this pinch formation. So I was going to share how I go about finding these and how I go about anchoring them. The high is always an important, plays an important role in your anchoring for the pinch. If we look at MWK, same thing here, anchored VWAP off of the high acts as resistance as that comes down, and anchored VWAP off of the low from the previous base is where price tends to find support. We tend to see this play out often as price bounces between those two levels. So anchored VWAP off of the high is always important, and then the low off the previous base. Those are ones that I always keep in mind to set up those pinch formations. The other one that's really important for me is the high volume gaps. We've talked about this in the past to tell who's in control. This is Netflix. This was a big volume breakout, big green candle, looked good, but within a couple days, sellers were back in control. As you see, all the price action came below a declining anchored VWAP. So anchored VWAP not only tells you when to get in, but it also can help tell you when to stay out, even when this big volume gap on news looked good. I'll get into anchored VWAP handoff here shortly on how you derive, this lower one. But for right now, just focusing on a few of the gaps and how price tends to act around them. Aline is another one. You can see where you had this big gap, good volume. EPS is very common, or a news event. When this happens, you dance around it for a couple days and then sellers take over. So if you were thinking, wow, this is great news, big volume, good price action, anchored VWAP can keep you out of trouble there as price rolls back below it. At other times, we'll look at Avaya here. Sometimes you have this big gap, good volume, strong reaction post EPS, and price just kind of dances around it. What you look for in that situation is you're looking for the reclaim here, price start to work its way higher for anchored VWAP. The direction of the anchored VWAP is always important. So we want to see that turn up, price come back and retest, which you may be getting right now, and then you get that bounce higher. That's what you want to look for long entry. But again, I'm just anchoring these at the big volume gap day, as you see there. Another one, QUOT. Anchoring here at the gap, big volume, dipped below a couple days, kind of shakes you out through there, and then buyers take over and a nice uptrend rather quickly after the EPS beat there. TPX, another one, same type action, anchored VWAP off of the gap, price dips below, and then buyers take control there. When it did pull back, anchored VWAP was the support several times where you saw buyers step right back in. Same can be true for in the opposite direction, where you have this big green candle, good volume, everything looks good, it rolls over, sellers stay in control the whole time, even on the bounces. Anchored VWAP off of that gap and high acted as resistance, so it can keep you out of trouble. Same thing with CSOD, same type play here, good volume, big bump up and then rolls over, sellers staying in control. Another one that we saw that had a great report, Twilio, same thing, sellers in control, and as good as that report was, buyers were just never able to gain control. So that's kind of how I use it with gaps, EPS gaps especially, or big news events. Another way I really like to use it is with IPOs. This is anchored VWAP from the IPO day with Upstart, and you can see it acted as support on these pullbacks, and then kind of lost anchored VWAP here, but it was still rising, had an inside day here, and it quickly reclaimed. Then you had the big volume gap on the recent EPS news, and now that kind of acts. It hasn't even really tested since then, but now that level you'd expect to act as support. It may dance around it for a couple days like I showed in those other ones, but the main thing I wanted to show here was how that IPO day is where you kind of want to start your anchored VWAP and focus. Same thing with Roblox, new IPO here. We see that late last week, Thursday, came back below anchored VWAP. Friday, inside day. I'll have to see how this acts here. It's very common for IPOs to undercut rather quickly the IPO day. So a lot of times we see that undercut. If you're looking to get in here, it's usually best to wait until it reclaims that anchored VWAP off of the IPO. So another important one for me is to start that anchored VWAP at day one, the IPO, and go from there. Getting into how I use the handoff method, we'll take a look at Apple. I'm going to zoom way out here to a monthly chart. And what you want to do is take the lows from the bases. So if we were to come back here, you have a low of the base back here. Let's just pick here to start. All right, you have another low from the base here. You have another low, the base here. So what I'm doing is basically just going from base to base, starting at my low within this base, then that hands off where it tags to the next one. So this is the next low within the base, and where it tags, that's when you add another anchored VWAP. And you just kind of keep going through this process. That sets up the low of the next base. You do the same thing you do here, add another one. And then what you'll see is that you set up these kind of levels, and then you have another one here. It's almost like fibs, but you're using anchored VWAP. And these pullbacks tend to find support at these prior levels from the lows of the prior base. And this works on all time frames. So it doesn't really matter whether you're looking at a 5-minute or 30-minute chart, or if you're zoomed out to a monthly or a weekly. The lows in the base, very important, as well as the highs. But like we discussed with the gaps and those other ones, you saw the how the highs act as resistance. What we're looking for here is to find the lows where we're going to find support. Just to give you another example, let's do on a different time frame. Let's look at Zoom. Let's take this one on a weekly. So with Zoom, again, we can kind of tie everything we discussed in here. We had IPO. You can start your anchored VWAP there from the IPO. You can see here is where buyers take control. But if you start with your low within the base, add an anchored VWAP there, you get a tag right here. So you add another one there. And you can kind of see that's right where we're at now, is testing that anchored VWAP from the low back here. Could actually add another one here, even though this is the one that's relevant right now. So let's just take that one out for now. And then from the high, so there are all your relevant VWAPs from the IPO, from the low, from the handoff, the tags of the low, and that's kind of right where we're finding support right now. If this level should fail, you would expect it to come down, find support at the next level down. Now, this is your pinch. Where do the buyers take control again? Back above this level, anchored VWAP off of the high. So you'd need to see price come bounce, push through this anchored VWAP off of the high, turn this back up rather than down, come back. A lot of times it'll retest and then up it goes. That's the point when buyers are back in control. So for me, the ones that are the most important: swing lows, lows of the bases, the highs, and the high volume gaps, as well as IPO day. For many, you can use week to date, month to date, quarter to date, year to date. There are many ways to do this, but my approach and the way I found most successful is to anchor the highs, anchor the swing lows or the swing low from the base, and then the IPOs. And I found that price action really does find support at those rising anchored VWAPs off the lows, resistance from anchored VWAP off of the highs, especially when it's declining, and then you look for that change where it breaks out of the pinch, turns the one from the high back upwards, and that's when you know the bulls are back in control. Hope this helps you with anchoring your VWAPs, and I'll see you over on FinTwit.